Taiwan has long been known as an ideal country for migrant workers due to its consistently high demand for labor, driven by an aging population and the historical development of the region. However, with the large number of immigrants, security-related issues sometimes arise due to ideological differences between certain groups of local residents and some migrant workers. Today's case also stems from such a cause. A young man, not yet 20 years old, Zung An Tum, had to pay the price for the heinous crime he committed. Today, we're going to explore mysterious criminal cases with thrilling details that will keep you on edge until the very last moment. If you also enjoy solving cases and gripping detective stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. On January 25, 1986, Taipei's evening news reported a shocking incident. A serious crime had occurred on North Xinsheng Boulevard, Section 2, claiming the lives of all three members of the Peng Shihuan family, owners of the Tuang dry cleaning shop, according to the report. The crime had taken place in the early hours of the same day. Most notably, the prime suspect in the case was Zung An Tum, a migrant worker from Beijing who was currently employed at the dry cleaning shop. At the time, Zung An Tum had just turned 19. He was the second child in a family of 3 siblings, with an older brother and a younger sister. At home, he was seen by all his family members and neighbors as a gentle young man, with fairly good academic performance and a caring, loving attitude toward his family. At that age, instead of continuing his education, Zung An Tum decided to put his studies on hold. He quietly left a letter for his family and set off for Taipei, Taiwan, to work. His goal was to earn money to help support his family. In fact, January 25th was only the 10th day since Zung An Tum had left home. It was also the very day his entire family was shocked to see his image appear on the news, labeled as the prime suspect in the murder of a family of 3. As soon as they heard the devastating news, his parents immediately tried to contact their second son, but there was no response. Still, knowing his gentle and kind-hearted nature, they firmly believed that he could never do something so terrible. However, the fact that they hadn't been able to reach him by phone during the entire 10 days since he had left deeply worried them. As a result, they decided to send their eldest son to Taipei to try and find out what had happened to his younger brother. A few days later, after arriving in Taipei, the older brother finally found Zung An Tum, who was staying at a relative's house. Without hesitation, the older brother urged him to call home so their parents could be at ease, and Zung An Tum did make that call. By that time, it had already been 16 days since he had left home. For all those days, this was the first phone call Zung An Tum made to his family. In the brief conversation, he told his parents not to worry about what they had seen on TV, because he hadn't done any of the things they were reporting. Of course, Zung An Tum's parents trusted him completely, worried that their son might have been falsely accused. His mother urged him to go to the police to explain everything clearly and clear his name. Later that same afternoon, Zung An Tum and his older brother took a taxi to the Zhongshan District Police Station in Taipei City. During the entire ride, Zung An Tum was noticeably quieter than usual, his eyes staring distantly out the window. It wasn't until they were almost there that he finally showed some emotion, tears streaming down his face. He turned to his brother and asked if he could go home just once to see their parents again. Upon hearing that question, the older brother seemed to understand everything, but even so, he didn't ask the taxi driver to turn around. During that interrogation, when asked whether he had any prior criminal record or if he had ever been involved with any gang or organized crime group, Zung An Han answered no to all questions regarding his work history in Taipei. He stated that he had registered through a labor export consulting agency and was placed to work at the Tuang dry cleaning shop, owned by the Peng Shihuan family, on January 16, 1986. So the question is, how, in just 10 short days in Taipei, Could a young man known for being gentle and with no prior offenses like Zung An Tum end up taking the lives of his employer's entire family? Perhaps to find the answer, we need to go back to the days before he moved to Taipei. Zung An Tum was born on July 26, 1967, into a family with a strong Catholic tradition. His father had contributed significantly to the development of transportation infrastructure in their local area, which helped boost the fruit farming business of the local residents. Because of this, his family had long been respected and held in high regard by the community. Following his family's exemplary tradition, Zung An Tum was known from a young age as a bright, well-educated child, and above all, obedient and respectful toward his parents. However, Zung An Tum's good reputation only lasted through the end of middle school. In fact, during his final year of secondary school, he began to rebel and started associating with the wrong crowd. Instead of focusing on his studies, he began skipping classes, climbing over school walls to sneak out, violating uniform rules, and even picking up smoking under the influence of his delinquent friends. This marked a dark period in his life. As he was repeatedly disciplined by the school, his most troubled phase came after he graduated from high school and enrolled at Chiayi Teachers College, a school known for its strict student discipline. Unable to endure the constant disciplinary actions and warnings, Zung An Tum and his family eventually agreed that he would temporarily leave school. After stepping away from his studies, he seemed to go through a period of deep reflection about everything he had done. Wanting to feel useful and not like a failure, he made the decision to travel to Taipei in search of a suitable job opportunity. In the letter he left behind before his departure, he expressed the emotional burden he had been carrying, asking his family to give him the chance to take control of his own life. Zung An Tum also expressed hope that his family would trust him to stay true to himself when faced with the pressures of the real world. When planning to take control of his own life, Zung An Tum was extremely confident in his ability to earn money. The reason was that he had read about and set his sights on an appealing restaurant job advertised in the newspaper, posted by a labor brokerage company called She-Cat. When he contacted and visited She-Cat, he expressed his desire to work at the restaurant as advertised. However, the agency told him that they would only refer him for the job if he paid 1,000 new Taiwan dollars up front. Upon hearing this, Zung An Tum was left speechless. He had only brought a little over 1,000 NTD with him when he left home. If he had to hand over such a large amount, it would be no different from being forced to pack up and return to his hometown. Thinking it over, Zung An Tum asked the boss of She-Cat if he could pay 500 NTD up front, and promised to come up with the remaining 500 within a few days. The boss agreed. A few days later, Zung An Tum managed to borrow the remaining 500 NTD from some relatives and friends living in Taipei. Feeling relieved and hopeful, he returned to She-Cat to receive the job referral to the restaurant as planned. But things didn't go as he had hoped. After Zung An Tum paid the full brokerage fee, the boss informed him that the restaurant wasn't open yet and wouldn't be until after the Lunar New Year holiday. In the meantime, he could instead be referred to a job at the Tuong dry cleaning shop, run by Mr. Peng Shi-Huan. The pay was even better to 500 NTD per day, more than the restaurant job, but the brokerage fee would also be significantly higher, 3,500 NTD. In today's terms, 3,500 new Taiwan dollars may not seem like a large amount, but in the context of 1986, especially for a teenager like Zung An Tum at the time, it was no small sum. The hesitation was clearly written on his face. Sensing his uncertainty, the boss at She-Cat offered a compromise. Zung An Tum could make a small partial payment up front, and the remaining amount would be deducted directly from his future wages. Feeling as if this was a stroke of good fortune, he immediately accepted the offer. He handed over an additional 500 NTD to She-Cat and gave them his identification card as collateral for the 2,000 NTD brokerage fee he still owed. Right after Zhang Antum and the brokerage company finalized the job placement agreement, the boss of Shikat made a phone call to Peng Shihuan, the owner of the Tuong dry cleaning shop, informing him that Zhang Antum was ready to sign the paperwork and be handed over as an employee. When Peng Shihuan arrived, he immediately paid off the 2,000 NTD debt that Zhang Antum owed. Naturally, this meant that instead of owing Shikat, the debt was now transferred to his new employer. A portion of his wages would be deducted each pay period until the amount was fully repaid. At the same time, Zhang Antum's identification card was handed over by the brokerage company to his employer for safekeeping. Once all matters related to the brokerage were settled, Zhang Antum followed his new employer back to the dry cleaning shop, the place where he would soon begin working. At the time Zhang Antum was hired, it was right before Lunar New Year, and customer demand was surging at an overwhelming rate, even though he was allowed to eat, sleep, and live at the workplace. Zhang Antum still found it unbearable to work 16 to 17 hours a day, from 9 a.m. until 2 or 3 a.m. the next morning, for several days in a row. After just a few days on the job, Zhang Antum began to feel completely exhausted by the intense schedule and lack of rest. There were times when Zhang Antum thought about calling home to talk to his family. But in the end, he held back, not wanting to worry his parents. Finally, on January 24th, after mustering all his courage, Zhang Antum approached his employer to ask for permission to quit and requested that his documents be returned so he could go home to spend Lunar New Year with his family. Upon hearing his request, Mr. Haihuan not only refused, but even threatened him in return. He claimed that after deducting food and lodging costs, Zhang Antum was only earning about 200 NTD per day, and since he had only worked for 9 days, the total wasn't even enough to repay the 2,000 NTD debt he owed. Angry and powerless in the face of his employer's shamelessness, Zhang Antum could do nothing but continue working in a daze. Around 4 p.m. that same day, after delivering laundry to several of the shop's customers, Zhang Antum made a stop at the home of a cousin who lived nearby. There, he vented about the unfair treatment he had endured, all while downing 5 or 6 bottles of wine. His cousin, unable to offer much help, simply tried to comfort Zhang Antum, urging him to hang on until after the new year, promising to help him find a more decent job afterward. After drinking heavily at his cousin's house, Zhang Antum returned to the dry cleaning shop to rest and sleep. But while he was fast asleep, at around 1 a.m. on January 25th, he was abruptly awakened by Mr. Peng Shihuan, who told him to urgently process a new order that had just come in, so the customer could pick it up early the next day. Still under the undue influence of alcohol and frustrated with the job, Zhang Antum responded sleepily that he wouldn't do it anymore, and if the boss wanted, he could go find someone better than him. That remark from Zhang Antum seemed to enrage Mr. Peng, who lashed back with a demeaning comment, implying that Zhang Antum, as an outsider, belonged to an inferior class and was only harming the shop's business by being there. Unable to control himself any longer, Zhang Antum lunged at his employer, and a fight broke out between the two. Hearing the loud commotion, the employer's wife and child rushed in to intervene, but Zhang Antum grabbed a pair of scissors and used them to launch a violent attack, continuing until the entire family stopped breathing. After committing the crime, Zhang Antum left the scene in exhaustion. At around 3 p.m., he made a phone call to turn himself in, clearly describing what he had done, his current location, and stating that he was waiting for the police to come arrest him. However, for reasons unknown, he waited the entire afternoon, but no one ever showed up to detain him. That evening, he went to a relative's house and was later found by his older brother, who then brought him to the authorities. After turning himself in directly at the Zhongshan District Police Station, Zhang Antum was immediately taken into custody. officially beginning the process of detention and interrogation on February 2, 1986. While in detention, Zhang Antum carefully wrote a suicide note, expressing deep regret and guilt over what he had done to the 3 victims. He shared his wish to donate his organs, and in a desperate act, he shattered the lenses of his glasses and used the broken shards to cut his own wrists. Fortunately, his extreme actions were discovered and stopped in time by the prison guards. During the time he was held in custody awaiting trial, Zhang Antum also wrote a letter to his parents once more, pouring out all the confusion and emotional turmoil he was experiencing. In the letter addressed specifically to his parents, Zhang Antum expressed deep respect for all that they had done and sacrificed for their children. He also apologized to them for feeling so exhausted and empty every time he thought about his crime. At the end of the letter, he begged for their forgiveness, saying that he felt deep remorse, and that it was his own impulsiveness that had caused his parents to suffer as well. Just over a month after his attempted suicide, on March 20th, the first trial for Zhang Antum's crime was held and concluded with a death sentence and a lifelong revocation of his civil rights. The outcome of the case left many people feeling satisfied. Some newspapers even ran headlines calling it, "Letting the wolf into the house." However, there was also a segment of the public that disagreed with the verdict. They demanded a retrial, citing certain details suggesting that the perpetrator's actions were the result of a chain of events provoked by the victim. Supporters of Zhang Antum argued that the victim, Peng Shihuan, had mistreated and exploited him, a simple migrant worker, to the point of breaking. Throughout the history of Taiwan's development, immigrant workers have always made up a significant portion of the population, especially those coming from mainland China. In the eyes of some locals, like Peng Shihuan, the growing presence of these immigrant laborers seemed to threaten the preservation of traditional local culture. On the other hand, for migrant workers like Zhang Antum, most come from backgrounds where opportunities are scarce. They often struggle to find work in their hometowns, and when arriving in unfamiliar places, they tend to be more vulnerable and pressured. In that context, Zhang Antum, still relatively young and lacking the mental resilience to cope with life's hardships, was subjected to verbal abuse and humiliation from his employer. As a result, he tragically lost control and committed an unforgivable crime. At the appellate trial held on June 25, 1986, Zhang Antum's lawyer argued in his defense that he had voluntarily turned himself in. Moreover, on the day of the incident, he had consumed a large amount of alcohol, which could have impaired his mental clarity at the time of the act. Therefore, the lawyer petitioned for a reduced sentence. However, after consideration, the judge rejected the plea for leniency. The court pointed out that after attacking his employer's family, Zhang Antum took time to clean up the crime scene, retrieve his personal identification documents, and even stole a considerable amount of money from the victim's home. Because of these actions, it was difficult to conclude that his surrender was truly voluntary. In addition, while Zhang Antum did drink heavily the night before the incident, there was a significant time gap between when he consumed the alcohol and when the crime occurred, enough for him to have sobered up by then. At the end of the appellate trial, the death sentence for Zhang Antum remained unchanged. His parents could only stand silently in the seating area reserved for the defendant's family, tears streaming down their faces, mourning a son who, despite having a fundamentally good nature, had to receive the harshest punishment due to his inability to control himself. Following the death sentence, a large number of people, more than 120 celebrities in Taiwan, signed a petition requesting the abolition of the death penalty for Zhang Antum. However, in the end, luck did not smile upon him. His life came to an end by a firing squad on May 15, 1987, just over a year after the crime took place. At that time, Zhang Antum had not yet turned 20, making him the youngest person ever executed. In Taiwan, there's a truth that wasn't revealed until much later. On the day of his execution, Zung En Tum refused, anesthesia, choosing to endure the pain as a way to atone for the 3 lives he had taken in just one impulsive minute of losing control. So what do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll discuss it together. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the intriguing cases we cover on this channel. For now, thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.